Now, joining us live for this very important discussion, we have Onyekachi Adekoya, Fellow, Nigerian Institute of Industrial Security, and the CEO of PR24 Nigeria. I also have joining me live from the nation's capital, Abuja, Okoro Chigozerim, Program Manager, Clean Foundation. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on the program.
Thank you for having me. Good evening to the viewers.
My pleasure. Evening, viewers.
We're happy to have you. I'd like to start with Chigozerim. President Muhammadu Buhari, the outgoing president, came to power in 2015 on 3 campaign promises: tackling insecurity, fighting corruption, and growing the economy. How will you rate his performance in dealing with the issues of insecurity in Nigeria?
Good evening, viewers. In terms of our in response to security challenges in the country, I would begin with past efforts made in the context of reforming the Nigerian police force and by extension the security architecture of the country. I recall that we have had several panels established to actually reform the Nigerian police force as a lead agency in internal security management in the country. While some of these, the recommendations of these panels and white papers associated with it ended up in paper, implementation has remained the greatest challenge. You asked me to go right in assessing this present administration.
Yes.
I understand that insecurity has taken another level in terms of the context of sophistication and in the context of the criminals. There are new strategies of operation and what have you, particularly from non-state armed groups that have really threatened the territorial existence and integrity of this country across the 6 geopolitical zones. That said, I would say that while past reform efforts failed in the context of securing Nigeria as a nation, in this instance, internal security operation, was because several reform efforts were not really tailored to the personnel to actually take charge and lead in this conversation in terms of facilitation of the reforms, in terms of the mandate of reforming the Nigerian police force, and also by extension other security agencies. Particular mandate is met. That said, under this present dispensation, under the Muhammadu Buhari, various innovations in the context of securing Nigeria. And presidential roadmap, the most recent presidential roadmap that was developed to actually begin the process of taking this conversation forward.
Now, Chigozerim, I know you've mentioned a number of issues, but just to simplify things, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the administration's performance in securities?
I would, so 1 to 10, I would say
Hello, we seem to be having some issues with your connection. I will get back to you, Chigozerim. Let me bring in Onyekachi into this conversation. Now, Onyekachi, Nigeria currently faces the triple threat of violent activities of several non-state armed groups who have publicly expressed a wish to scupper the country's vulnerable democracy. Boko Haram remains a threat alongside the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, and bandit gangs. How worried should Nigerians be about the state of insecurity as we approach the 2023 elections?
Very good question to ask. How worried should we be? There's cause for concern. Nigeria is experiencing a wicked problem when it comes to the current set of challenges that we have, as you have reeled out. Unfortunately for us, we are entering an election cycle at a point in time where traditionally and cyclically also, crime starts to spike very, very significantly. We are now in the dry season, which also happens to be the fighting season. We are seeing a lot of bandit activity in the Northwest. Farmers are finding it very difficult. Adoption is high, even in the FCT. On December 10th, about 16 people were kidnapped in Kuje. If you travel to the FCT at this time, you will probably see gun trucks stationed at different points in the FCT as we speak. And then we're not sure if it's a fighting patrol or just a show of force. We're now seeing the military in gun trucks patrolling within the metropolis of the FCT. ISWAP has now established a presence in the North Central, in Kogi to be precise. ISWAP and Boko Haram are not letting up in the Northeast. Now, that doesn't give or paint a fair picture to what the military has done. The military has done a lot of work. The GOC 1DIF is doing a lot of work within its own axis, 7 Gas Brigade. In the theater of the war, where you now have 2 divisions, within that theater, the guys are also doing the best they can do. The military has operations in over 31 states. The police IGP has said the right things he should say. The NSA has said the right things he should say. INEC has had consultative meeting with the security forces, but we continue to see a spike in politically motivated violence. And what is a bit troubling is that the government security forces, or the personnel of the government security forces, are almost now resigning to fate to say that they expect election violence, and by their own admission or submission, it appears like they will be behind the curve in trying to provide the level of security needed for the polls to occur. The polls will occur regardless, but INEC's problem are also hydra-headed. INEC has over 1.4 million ad hoc staff to deploy for this poll across 774 local government, not counting the polling units. If you put all our forces together, we don't have up to 450,000 military personnel. So you can just see how far behind the government security forces themselves.
Quite a Herculean task indeed.
It is.
Yes. Now, on October the 23rd, the United States Embassy issued an alert about an elevated risk of terror attacks against a wide range of targets in Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. Thankfully, no incident happened. What's your take on these security alerts and travel advisories? A number of people have said, you know, it leads to apprehension and heightened tension. What's your take on it? Do you think these foreign governments should just communicate with their host government and not bring out these alerts in public to cause palpable tension?
I don't think I want to be caught into any diplomatic spat with the ambassador of the U.S. government to Nigeria. I've been on TV as having asked him to come and share with Nigerians, if he would not mind, the set of information they saw or had to have put out that alert. I think that some of it was just a knee-jerk reaction. There were a series of events that occurred, but they are not activities that are even beyond the UN bombing in Abuja that occurred in our recent history. And even at that time, the US did not put out an alert to say they will pull out of Nigeria. So that's neither here nor there. The Nigerian government has also put out an alert advising Nigerians to travel safely in the US or in the UK because of gun violence. So it's neither here nor there, but to the bigger issue, why were Nigerians quite spooked? I think it just comes to our security culture, the level of security education in the country, the level of security awareness. Because security as a field is something that almost everybody would claim to have an idea of what it entails. And what then happens is that there's a lot of assumption as to what we should be doing in terms of even projecting force or developing our own capabilities to address the set of problems that we have within our geopolitical space. So the culture, we're not there yet. Mm-hmm. The level of awareness, understanding of what to do when an alert is put out is not there. That's why you saw the panic. But in the US, they put out alerts periodically. In Israel, alerts are put out periodically. In Ukraine, with the Russian-Ukraine crisis, air raid sirens are going off. In Israel, they send out SMS alerts for people to shelter in place. So I think that we saw something from the National Security Advisor as a form of advisory, trying now to build that culture and a sense of awareness in Nigerians when you see an alert.
Onyekachi, if we were to adopt that, which has many positives, whose responsibility will it be to communicate to the people? Would it be the Ministry of Information or the Ministry of Defense or the National Security Advisor?
In this case, it will be the Ministry of Interior. The Ministry of Interior should be tasked with that responsibility, which would be our own Department of Homeland Security. But don't forget also that under this administration, the Ministry of Police Affairs was separated from the Ministry of Interior, which I do think is a bit of an aberration, though the government gave its reason. So that should be under the purview of the Ministry of Interior, working with the Ministry of Communication and the National Orientation Agency. But it's principally the core function of the police and the Minister of Interior.
Okay, Onyekachi, before we establish a connection with Chigozurem, according to data from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, instances of conflict, political violence, and protest in 2021 marked the highest on record, and 2022 is on track to surpass those alarming figures. I do recall in your opening submission, you mentioned that the GOC of the 1st Division is doing a lot, and the military is doing its best in spite of its limitations. So how do you translate these figures, and what are its implications for the 2023 elections?
As a matter of fact, ACLED has captured over 3,123 violent incidents in Nigeria in 2022, with an estimated number of 9,000 something casualties till date. And like I said in my opening remarks, the violence that we see has not reached its peak. So that's just the true picture of what we see. Now, in terms of the most violent elections that we've had, I think so far, empirically, 2011 was the most notorious electoral cycle we had, with over 800 persons dead. Whether we will surpass this at this 2020 election is yet to be seen. So far, we've seen over 8 violent attacks against INEC, bulk of them in the south. We've seen an assassination in Kaduna. We've seen kidnap of party faithful in Benue, in some parts of Edo. So far, maybe we fairly say 1 assassination or 2 so far. Now, what's a bit worrisome is that when we did initial analysis and assessment, we were anticipating or projecting that the post-election violence, which typically would peter off after 1 week, may be a bit more entrenched in 2023, because if the APC wins, problem, as it were, PDP wins, there'll be some disagreements, the Labour Party wins. So the way we are being pulled by centrifugal forces, the near-term prognosis for the post-election cycle is a bit worrisome. Now, we are also a bit more alarmed by the fact that pre-election violence would likely spike because of the kind of politics that is being played. There are a lot of moving parts to this. Perhaps we may not have enough time to dimension the issues, but suffice to say that the 2023 election will be conducted amidst high level of violence, and because of the spread and the span of the scope of work expected of INEC, unfortunately, government security forces will be behind the curve. There's so much they cannot do, and there's so little they can do at the same time. That's our own estimation.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, the propensity for violence when it comes to elections. Elections are a civic exercise everywhere in the world. Sometimes it's not even a public holiday. People go to their workplaces, you know, cast their ballot, and go about their business. So why and what makes elections in Nigeria a trigger for violence? Why is it different in our case?
Yeah, good question again. I think it's the way we play our politics. It's the way we play our politics. Typically, we play politics that involves a war of attrition against your opposition in their areas of strength, to destabilize, disorganize, imperil their logistics, such that you minimize their outing, and also deploy strategies that would be the political class in ways that you maximize your areas of strength. So whether it be in form of ballot snatching, intimidation, sporadic gunfire on the eve of elections, flashes of violence within areas of opposition stronghold, dislodging INEC logistics capabilities, as we see Molotov cocktails are being thrown at INEC facilities across the country, particularly in the South. So it's just generally how the politicians would set out.
Would you also say that because of the attractiveness of the office, you know, the winner-takes-all nature of our politics, and when people are in government, there's some of them almost like emperors, the paraphernalia that comes with the office? Is that what makes them so desperate? If political office wasn't so attractive, do you think we'll still be witnessing such levels of violence and insecurity?
I think that'll be going into the realm of conjectures, and basically that's beyond the remit of what I'm paid to do. Yes. Mine is to look at the data and look at the crime statistics and say what is driving crime, how can people keep safe. Human nature in itself is quite dynamic.
Indeed.
I wouldn't just think that it's because of the attraction. Yes, there's the attraction of office. Yes, if we dimension the social dimensions of these issues, there's a winner-take-all syndrome. There's the fact that we don't have very strong institutions in themselves. But yeah, there's a bigger problem. Now, the bigger problem here is that over the years, the percentage of voter turnout hovers around 35 to 45%. And the reason why you have low voter turnout is because of the issues that I've reeled out. The fact that, like the past INEC chairman, Jega said, he says, check the politicians. If you want to know the source and the reason for the violence you see and the attack on INEC, he says, just you go to politicians. So I think there's a strategy that has been somewhat entrenched in our polity, which is more like why you see some of the things that you're saying as to what drives the thinking of politicians. That will be all within their minds.
Thank you, Onyekachi. I'd like to bring in Chigozerim. I believe we've reestablished connection with her. Now, Chigozerim, between 2019 and now, there's been over 53 attacks on INEC facilities, and the attackers are becoming more daring. How worrying is this trend, and what do you think is the motivation behind these attacks? Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so from recent happenings ahead of the 2023 and also past experiences, we've noticed that elections from this part of the country is always seen and implemented as a war zone. and it's been worrisome for those of us that are electoral stakeholders. Since 2011 to today, Clean Foundation Organization have conducted both national and regional security assessments where we identified electoral risk actors and also electoral risk factors rather, and actors that constitute threat ahead of. And what we've documented over the years is that politicians remain the greatest secretaries in the country. What I'm saying is empirically based. And so with that in mind, that is closely linked to what happened during the 2011 post-election violence that marred the national election conducted in Nigeria. And then in 2015, we also had similar tension in the country up to 2019, where for Clean and other civil sector organizations that monitor the process in real time, we documented also violations by politicians and their other criminal elements. So with this in mind, and as we also prepare for the 2023 elections, what we've seen just the same risk factors, the same actors, and what have you. And so I think the direction to go are the importance of continuous mapping of threat assessments by security agencies. So both at the national level and at the state level. And so what it does is it takes care of, so the officers are seen very proactive in response, in analyzing the issue and also taking proactive measures to respond to identified threats. The second one, I think, would be that both INEC and also active citizens in terms of participation, in terms of getting real time involved in the whole conversation. Like I said earlier, the kind of threats that Nigeria is experiencing, and also by extension the continent, is the fact that we haven't seen for a long time. And so it is very worrisome. But as worrisome as it's been, I think the best way and the direction to go should be for the citizens to get real time. On daily basis, children are abducted. On daily basis, schools are shut down because of insecurity. And the level of insecurity in the country is such that everyone is affected from your.
Okay, Chigozurim, we still seem to be having some connection issues with you. Our engineers will try and resolve it as soon as they can. Now, back to you, Onyekachi. No group, just last week, there were attacks on INEC offices. Still on the subject of attacks on INEC facilities and offices. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks, but authorities have in recent past blamed the IPOB group for its increased restiveness in the southeast. IPOB denied involvement, but the Imo State Police Command had announced that the attack that happened last week at the INEC facilities in Imo State was perpetrated by IPOB. The group already threatened to disrupt the 2023 elections if its leader is not released. So in a video clip published on the 21st of April 2022, 4 men brandishing rifles proclaimed that there shall be no elections in the southeast and anybody that attempts any election matter will die. The group also explicitly warned election officials, stating for the INEC people, what will happen to you when you get here? When you get here, only God knows, quoting them, vowing to burn politicians that participate. These are very serious threats. How should the government respond to this? And is there still time, because February is just a few months away, to keep the calm in the southeast so these elections can take place?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 parts to your question. First is when you said that no group has claimed responsibility, that's correct. However, if we look at the actors within the southeast and look at recent history, In 2018, IPOB, then under Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, clearly said that IPOB and Biafrans are not interested in the elections and that the elections would not hold. In 2020, when Soludo was contesting, they said just about the same thing. And as a matter of fact, went ahead to declare a sit at home during the elections. And that also impacted on the elections. So this time around, they have said the same thing, that except that Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is released, there shall be no elections within Biafra land. So we can just connect the dots and follow the trend. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, because the question is, what should government be doing? There are multi-actors within that region. There's IPOB, there's ESN, there are armed criminal groups, there are on God no men or unknown God men, whichever they are called pretty much. There are local street urchins. They are just like we call them armed criminal groups really, or we call them black market contractors. Just people who can be contracted to foment violence for a fee. And so we have a number of actors and even government security forces themselves acting within that space. We saw at the last Simon Akpa issued sit at home that residents in Enugu tried to resist and come out. And, you know, there's a bit of a groundswell now saying that life must go on in the Southeast. So when they make such statements, you look at their intentions and their capability. They've shown a fair amount of capability to enforce those sit-at-home orders, a certain zest for animalistic brutality, so they use that to instill fear. Government has very little options when you are dealing with insurgencies in urban centers. And I think that we've seen several clearance operations. You can't go the route of area bombardments, then lest you say that it's Nigerian government against Biafran people and it's a repeat of the aggressions of the Civil War. So you have to deploy the government has to continue to deploy what it's doing, different options within the ambits of statecraft to deal with the issues. And the government is dealing with the issues. They are not getting a free hand. We can't say all that government should do on air, but suffice to say that the police is constrained, the military is constrained, the people themselves must divorce themselves from some of those sentiments that reinforces the presence or the essence of these armed criminal groups. It's like the case in the Northwest, where you have Ansaru claiming that they are protecting the people from the bandits. And the question begs, who is Ansaru, who are the bandits, who are the armed criminal groups? So, so Nigeria, this is the state of Nigeria, basically.
Okay, a fine place to go on a break. And when we come back, we'll be looking at proactive measures in safeguarding the country towards the 2023 elections. You're watching Secure the Continent, a News Central Television. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation. If you're just joining us, you're watching Secure the Continent and News Central Television, and we've been discussing the state of insecurity in relations to the 2023 elections. And I still have here with me Onyekachi Adekoya, Fellow, Nigerian Institute of Industrial Security and CEO PR24 Nigeria from Lagos, and Okoro Chigozere, Program Manager, Clean Foundation, joining from Abuja. Now, Chigozere, there is a huge number of internally displaced persons in northern Nigeria as a result of violent attacks in the past. This is a huge group. What has INEC done to expand its voting system for these IDPs to ensure their participation in elections?
Yeah, so I'm aware that INEC is intentional with regards to the participation and inclusion of all vulnerable persons. Ahead of, it started in 2019 fully, and then ahead of 2023. As tense as most of those environments are, INEC have put structures in place to ensure that this happens. I'm aware that from the accreditation process down to collection of PVCs, that persons, IDPs, and other vulnerable members of our communities, particularly in some of these highly volatile communities and states, that they were part and parcel of the entire process. Civil society organizations like CLEAN are also on that situation room platform, monitor this process to ensure that the entire process is inclusive of all persons, including even PWDs, women, youth, IDPs, and other vulnerable, even the aged and other vulnerable communities. That said, I think the priority now on the part of INEC would be to ensure that these vulnerable members of the communities and the states, and also the Nigerians, are able to come out on election day to vote. So that for us is very, very important. And that is why we are advocating for active citizenship and ensuring that we all play our different roles in securing Nigeria. I have said earlier that what we are witnessing now is at another level in terms of sophistication, in terms of threats, and in terms of even the actors. And so that also justifies the importance of profiling these armed groups. Not just profiling them, but also ensuring that they are decapacitated. So the essence is just to ensure that we find ways around to ensure that Nigerians come out on election day to cast their vote. This is very, very important. Another thread that I would love INEC to pay very, very close attention to is under digital security. So cyber security, if you can call it like that. You recall that for the first time, election results will be transmitted via technology. And so while experiences in previous elections suggest that while INEC and stakeholders are busy brainstorming and coming up with innovative ideas on how to transform the Nigeria's electoral system in such a way that it meets international standards, politicians and their other criminal elements are busy also putting in place structures that will actually ensure that the processes put in place by INEC, they are frustrated. And so ahead of 2023, I think there is need for INEC to get it right in the context of cyber security and ensuring that we don't have issues of hackers having access to systems, that particularly during collation process and also result counting and what have you, because one criminal used or one IT or expert used by politicians can actually cause mayhem on that day.
Yeah, and of course disrupt the credibility of the entire process. I'd like to bring in Onyekachi here. Now, Onyekachi, quite a number of observers have commended the conduct of Nigerian security operatives in the off-cycle elections we had in Ekiti, Anambra, and Osun states. I mean, it's obvious that you could deploy as many security operatives to those elections because they're off-cycle. But do you believe the Nigerian police and security operatives have what it takes to ensure the peaceful conduct of elections in the 176,846 polling units across the country on election day?
Tough question. If you do 176,000 times 2, you very quickly get an average of about 360-something thousand, which we currently do not even have. So I'm not very confident that they can address all the issues. But the Nigerian security forces have shown their ability to be innovative and to improvise and to make the best of what they have, supported by the military, supported by the state security services, by NSCDC. They can only do as much and as best as they can do to protect major logistics center. Of course, there'll be movement restrictions, which also acts as a bit of force multiplier on their own side. But I think that the greatest tool they will have, or support system, will be the people themselves, because the Nigerian government cannot do it alone. INEC cannot do it alone. We don't even have all the resources, as it were, because I hear a lot of people talk, INEC should do this, INEC should do that. The resources of INEC are not infinite. When you even talk about cyber attacks and the risk of cyber attacks, those concerns are very germane. As complex, as drilled as the Nigerian banking system is, they are still suffering from massive cyber attacks, though underreported. So that's a very, very huge risk. And I also worry that the politicians we have these days are quite sophisticated in their own rights. So, I mean, it behooves on Nigeria to rally around. The last election cycle, we said defend your vote within reasonable limits. People just have to come out en masse, because the percentage of the people troubling Nigeria are not even up to 1% of the population of the country. It's just the fear factor that they have, and the fact that the forces are quite constrained. So there's a lot of cause for concern, and the presidency must go beyond lip service with profound respect and show the leadership, and to provide a body language that shows his resolve of a zero tolerance to any form of violence from any of the party. Even that said, the National Peace Accord Committee, even Bishop Matikuka is concerned that despite the sign of the peace accord, politicians are not reining in their supporters, as we saw with Goodluck Jonathan, who said, my ambition is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. We've not seen any of such statement from any of the leading politicians. So there's a lot to worry about, and except the people factor come in, there's so little that the government and the forces can do.
Now, Onyekachi, quickly, before I go to Chigozie, I'm glad you mentioned the National Peace Committee. It's signed a peace pact for presidential candidates. How effective is this? And should this peace initiative cascade down to the level of governorship and parliamentary elections? Because, I mean, the presidential elections is not the only one we're going to have in February 2023.
Absolutely. I mean, the peace committee should continue their work. As a matter of fact, the peace committee members themselves are muting the idea of reinviting the candidates to sign another accord because of what we are seeing. And again, because it's all voluntary and there are no clear restrictions. But we've seen support from the UK, US government to say they will put sanctions in place. We also need the international community to put their foot down and make very clearly that some of the shenanigans we've been used to will not be tolerated. So it also percolates downward. There are accords signed at the local government level, but some of these are just quite honorary at the best. Yeah.
Now, Chigozie, past experiences have shown that an election can be a trigger for violence, especially in this part. How big of a problem is the spread of disinformation and fake news on social media, and what can be done to curb this?
And so, in recent and also past security threat assessment conducted by CLEAN, fake news was actually one of the findings that can trigger violence. And so I'm happy that there are organizations, civil society organizations that have taken bold steps to fact check and ensure that it's not business as usual with regards to politicians and their cohorts heating up the polity for selfish gains before, during, and even after the elections. And so what we have in recent times are organizations, credible groups like CDD, Center for Democracy and Development, that are really, they have expertise in fact-checking and also working closely with credible media organizations like the Premium Time Center for investigative journalism. I think their new name is CJID now. And then there are other groups too. If you check recent debates by presidential candidates, you see that fact checkers, professional fact checkers were brought in to be part of the process. And so we had statistics quoted by some of these aspirants that the fact checkers actually on the spot there fact checked and gave us the real time in terms of the reality. Just yesterday or day before yesterday, there was a particular one that I'm monitoring that a credible media firm that is also with expertise in fact checking actually said that it was fake news. And so I think across the country, there's need for us to have more of these credible groups emerge, both by civil society organizations and also media professionals working together to say no to some of these, to say no to all fake news that are actually contributing in heating up the quality and also to also present facts. For us, Nigerians are actually interested in ensuring that this election should be issue-based. There are a lot of, it's a hopeless situation as far as this country is concerned. And so there are key indices or indicators of assessment for these politicians. And so what we want to see are issue-based campaigns, and whoever that will come out for civil society organizations, we are more interested in the process, okay, that leads to whoever that emerges at the end of the day. And so for politicians, they should also know that it's not business as usual. And also for all of us, civil society, working closely with media persons, professionals, and also development partners and other academia, professionals to ensure that some of these statistics emerging from here and there that are also heating up the quality, and also certain comments made by both some of these politicians and their supporters shouldn't be condoned. They should be fact-checked.
Okay, I really wish we could go on, but we've fast run out of time. This is such an important conversation to have. And I would like to say thank you to you, Onyekachi Adekoya, and Chigozie Okoro for being a part of this program. I do appreciate your contribution, your time, and your insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peaceful, credible elections are vitally important, not just for Nigeria's future stability, but also for the continent's wider adoption of the democratic process. Security agencies should use the few months left before the February elections to push back violent groups and liberate those already seized, balance the allocation of security forces for election monitoring, and the continued containment of violent groups. Thank you very much for being a part of Secure the Continent today. I'm Gbenga Aborowa. See you next time. Bye-bye.